Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello everyone. Well, we're going to continue, of course, with this amazing Go show, the opening of the eyes. So far, Nichiren's been giving us quite a history lesson on the progression of Buddhist scholarship. Quite a scholar. I think of him often. I was this morning answering questions on Quora.com. I guess it doesn't surprise me anymore, but it does still amaze me how much ignorance there is in the world. And I don't mean that, I'm not calling anybody stupid. Understand, ignorance just means not knowing. And so answering, when I see questions like, what's the difference between Bodhisattva and Nirvana? I'm reminded that even though there may be lots of Buddhist scholarship terminology floating around in different circles, appropriated by every type of I don't know, I call it what it is, egotistical machinations for some sort of recognition or fame, or I don't know, the human animal. Well, I mean, Shakyamuni was right. We live in a time of avarice. So it's difficult. It's difficult to teach. I understand now when Shakyamuni says this teaching will be difficult to understand and difficult to propagate, because human minds at this stage of our development so constantly and easily distracted. Just points out how important constant study, daily study is to our enlightenment, to our life condition, to our appreciation of this beautiful, amazing life. The Lotus Sutra contains two important teachings: the Dharma Analysis Treasury Establishment of Truth, Precepts, Dharma, Characteristics, and the Three Treatises Schools have never heard even so much as the name of these teachings. The Flower Garland and True Word Schools, on the other hand, have surreptitiously stolen these doctrines and made them the heart of their own teachings. The doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is found in only one place, hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter of the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra. Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu were aware, but did not bring it forth into the light. Tendai, Chiche, alone embraced it and kept it ever in mind. The doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life begins with the concept of the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. But the Dharma Characteristics and the Three Treatises schools speak only of 8 worlds and know nothing of the entirety of the 10 worlds, much less of the concept of their mutual possession. The Dharma Analysis Treasury, Establishment of Truth, and Precept schools derive their teachings from the Agama Sutras. They are aware of only of the 6 worlds, and know nothing of the other 4 worlds. They declare that in all the 10 directions there is only one Buddha, and do not even preach that there is any other Buddha in any of the 10 directions. Of the principle that all sentient beings alike possess the Buddha nature, they of course say nothing at all. They refuse to acknowledge that even a single person possesses the Buddha nature. In spite of this, one will sometimes hear members of the Precepts and Establishment of Truth schools declaring that there are Buddhas in the 10 directions, or that all living beings possess the Buddha nature. This is because the teachers of these schools, who appeared after the passing away of the Buddha, had stolen these Mahayana doctrines and incorporated them into the teachings of their own schools. To illustrate, in the period before the appearance of Buddhism, the proponents of the non-Buddhist teachings in India were not so bound up in their own views. But after the appearance of the Buddha, when they had listened to and observed the Buddhist teachings, they became aware of the shortcomings of their own doctrines. They then conceived the clever idea of appropriating Buddhist teachings and incorporating them into their own doctrines, and as a result, they fell into even deeper error than before. These are examples of the errors known as appropriating Buddhism or plagiarizing Buddhism. Isn't that exactly what I was saying in my opening statement? Amazing. The same thing occurred in the case of non-Buddhist scriptures in China. Before Buddhism was brought into China, Confucianism and Taoism were rather naive and childish affairs. But in the later Han, Buddhism was introduced to China and challenged the native doctrines. In time, as Buddhism became more popular, there were certain Buddhist priests who, because they had broken the precepts, were forced to return to secular life, or who elected to join forces with the native creeds. Through such men, Buddhist doctrines were stolen and incorporated into the Confucian and Taoist teachings. In Volume 5 of Great Concentration and Insight, we read, this is Tin Dai's teachings, "These days there are many devilish monks who break the precepts and return to lay life. Fearing that they will be punished for their actions, they then go over to the side of the Taoists. Hoping to gain fame and profit, they speak extravagantly of the merits of Lao Tzu and Zhuang Tzu, usurping Buddhist concepts and reading them into their erroneous scriptures. They twist what is lofty and force it into a mean context. They destroy what is exalted and drag it down among the base, striving to put the two on an equal level." On Great Concentration and Insight, comments on this passage as follows. "Though they are monks, they destroy the teachings of Buddhism. Some break the precepts and return to lay life, as Wan Yung Sung did. Then, as laymen, they work to destroy the teachings of Buddhism. Men of this kind steal and usurp the correct teachings of Buddhism and use them to supplement and bolster the erroneous writings. The passage on twisting what is lofty means that, appropriating the outlook of a Taoist, they try to place Buddhism and Taoism on the same level, to make equals of the correct and the erroneous, though reason tells us that this could never be. Having once been followers of Buddhist teachings, they steal what is correct and use it to bolster what is incorrect. They twist the lofty 80,000 teachings of the 12 divisions of the Buddhist canon and force them into the mean context of Lao Tzu's 2 chapters and 5,000 words, using them to interpret the base and mistaken teachings of that text. This is what is meant by destroying what is exalted and dragging it down among the base. These comments should be carefully noted, for they explain the meaning of the foregoing description of events. The same sort of thing happened within Buddhism itself. Buddhism was introduced to China during the Yunping era, Common Era 58 to 75, of the later Han Dynasty, and in time established its supremacy over Confucian and Taoist teachings, but differences of opinion developed within Buddhism, resulting in the 3 schools of the south and 7 schools of the north, which sprang up here and there like so many orchids or chrysanthemums. In the time of the Chen and Sui dynasties, however, the great teacher Chiche defeated these various schools and returned Buddhism once more to its primary objective of saving all living beings. Later, the teachings of the Dharma characteristics and true word schools were introduced from India, and the flower garland school also made its appearance. Among these schools, the Dharma characteristic school set itself up as an arch opponent of the Tendai school because their teachings are as contradictory to each other as fire is to water. However, when the Tripitaka master Xuanzang and the great teacher Tzu-En closely examined the works of Tendai, they came to realize that the views of their own school were in error. Although they did not openly repudiate their own school, it appears that in their hearts they switched their allegiance to the Tendai teachings. From the beginning, the Flower Garland and True Word schools were both provisional schools based on provisional sutras, but the Tripitaka masters Shan Wu-wei and Qin Kang Chi, who introduced the esoteric True Word teachings to China, usurped the Tendai's doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life and made it the core of the teachings of their school, adding the practice of mudras and mantras and convincing themselves that their teachings surpassed Tendai's. As a result, students of Buddhism unaware of the real facts came to believe that the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life was to be found in the Mahavarachana Sutra that had been brought from India. Similarly, in the time of the Flower Garland patriarch Cheng Kuang, the Tendai doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life was surreptitiously incorporated and used to interpret the passage in the Flower Garland Sutra that reads, "The mind is like a skilled painter." People were unaware that this was what had happened. So again, ignorance. When you don't know and you're seeking, you can easily be misled by unscrupulous teachers. In the case of our own country of Japan, the Flower Garland and other schools that comprise the 6 schools of Nara were introduced to Japan before the Tendai or Tendai and True Word schools. The Flower Garland, 3 treatises, and Dharma characteristic schools argued and contended as inimical to one another as water and fire. When the great teacher Dengyo appeared in Japan, he not only exposed the errors of the 6 schools, but also made it clear that the True Word school had stolen the principles of the Lotus Sutra as expounded by Tendai and made them the heart of the teachings of its own school. The great teacher Dengyo set aside the various tenets propounded by the leaders of the other schools and solely, in the light of the sutras, attacked their views. As a result, he was able to defeat 8 eminent priests of the 6 schools, then 12 priests, then 14, then over 300, as well as the great teacher Kobo. Soon there was not a single person in all Japan who did not acknowledge allegiance to the Tendai school, and the great temples of Nara, Toji, and other temples throughout all the provinces became subordinate to the head temple of the Tendai school at Maohei. The great teacher Dengyo also made it clear that the founders of the various other schools in China, by acknowledging allegiance to the doctrines of Tendai, had escaped committing the error of slandering the correct teachings of Buddhism. So, see, it's nothing new. This is going on today, maybe even more vociferously, if you will. Later, however, conditions in the world declined and people became increasingly shallow in wisdom. They no longer studied or understood the profound doctrines of the Tendai school, and the other schools became more and more firmly attached to their own prejudiced views. Eventually, the 6 schools of the True Word School turned upon and attacked the Tendai school. The latter, growing ever weaker, in the end found that it was no match for the other schools. To aggravate the situation, absurd new schools such as Zen and Pure Land appeared and began attacking the Tendai school as well. And more of its lay supporters transferred their allegiance to these erroneous schools. In the end, even those priests of the Tendai school, who were looked up to as men of eminent virtue, all admitted defeat and lent their support to these schools. How lamentable. Not only Tendai, but True Word and the 6 schools as well were forced to yield their lands and estates to these misguided schools, and correct teachings of the Lotus Sutra fell into oblivion. As a result, the Sun Goddess, the God Hachiman, the Mountain King of Mount Hei, and other great benevolent deities who guard the nation, no longer able to taste the flavor of the correct teachings, departed from the land. Demons came forward to take their place, and it became apparent that the nation was doomed. And my camera is complaining, so before I run out of battery or time or whatever it's complaining about, we'll take a pause and I'll continue with this in a few moments. Thank you for listening. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. As always, I very much appreciate your patronage. Thank you.